Hi, it's Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions, and we've got an action-packed week for you. We are doing grief this week, and I know grief is like, oh, that's so depressing. Well, it's literally a stage of it. But we've got a lot of great things, and we're going to talk about grief beyond loss, and there's some great things that we are looking at when it comes to what grief is and what grief isn't. Grief is us moving on and finding new ways. So we can grieve the loss of jobs, we can grieve relationships. There's so much beyond just the loss of life and death. Where grief, we're looking at it every single day and not even realizing we're in a bereaved state. So this week we've got grief beyond loss and changes and understanding the grief response. We have attachment and how this reflects in loss and change. We have healing our familial wounds. So looking at our past and the capacity our family has. We put a lot of stress on our parents to be perfect, and best thing we can do is really understand that they are only human. And then how to grieve in increments. How do you hold space for yourself? As always, I've got key steps to live a happier and healthier life workbook. Get it on Amazon. It's dropped in the video description, as well as saying goodbye to bad brain, which has a lot of these principles in a more neuroscience-based format. You can also go to my website. I've got lots of blogs. After each one of these videos, there's going to be a free resource that you can access on my blog. I look forward to talking with you and hearing from you. Please hit that subscribe button and like and comment. I am here to support you. Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions. Hi, it's Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions, and we are talking all about attachment and change. So I have a diagram that's coming out in my newest book of the part 2 of Key Steps to Live a Happier and Healthier Life, looking at emotional regulation. And in our Universal Constructs chapter, we have this really complicated diagram that enhances, if you were to zoom in on distressing thought, feeling, and belief that comes into the negative cycle, you would see that our emotions, how we regulate our emotions, our emotional expression, really triggers our cognitive distortions. It kicks off the attachment cycle, which then reinforces our negative narrative. It opens the amygdala into the hallway of all of our past trauma and stress. It then allows the past to occupy the present, and then we start to live in perceived realities. We start to invoice our partners. We start to get into that triangulated relationship place. So we kind of interact with others based on our past, not our present. That opens up the cycle of perceived expectations, what others perceive of us and how we should and could perform, and also our expectations of other people, so what they should and could be doing. And then that opens the door for either shutting down emotionally or having really big anger or dramatic outbursts, and it reinforces again the emotional expression that is happening. And all of those things are happening at 5, 10, 100, 1,000-fold. It can spiral very quickly. And so I say all of that preemptively. You can go to the video. It'll be in a couple weeks. I'll be doing a video on it. That attachment really is a big part of how we interpret the world. And I also add this into the Saying Goodbye to Bad Brain book is, attachment is a part of how we are building and reinforcing the bad brain. And yes, attachment does come from childhood and from childhood caregivers, but we can build attachment styles or unhealthy attachment styles, dysregulated attachment styles, because of the relationships that we get in. And toxic work environments can create some anxious or avoidant attachment styles. So just be awareness is key. Just be aware, and there's no shame in the game. Like, we can pick it up from anywhere. So it's not all one person's fault. It's not your mother's fault. It's not your father's fault. It's a combination of a lot of things, and it doesn't matter where it comes from. It matters that you recognize it's there and how it's affecting your behavior and how you're interacting with others. And so when we get in a stress state, when we are starting to have emotions, when our trauma is coming back up and we're triggered, when a universal construct is feeling as if it is not there, when there's any stress or pressure on our performance, attachment will show its head. So attachment is a bunch of bar graphs. It's not a pie chart. So you're not pulling from one to gain another or losing from one to use the other, but rather we have a certain amount of secure attachment. Oftentimes it's over 50% we're secure. So when life is good, we have a secure attachment. We can give and receive freely without thinking that there's any cost to that exchange. But when we get in a stress state, and this is why I do so well at couples therapy and why couples all need therapy, is because when we are in a stress state, and that is life. We are going to be stressed. As we enter into adulthood, stress is there. Mortgages are there. Work is there. There are competing things that will create stress. And when we're in that stress state, our negative attachment styles will start to bubble up. It's just a part of that bad brain thinking. And when that attachment style starts to bubble up, you will see that you are leaning towards either fear of abandonment, which means you overly ingratiate somebody and you're Lenny with the mouse. You're like, come here, my precious, don't leave me. To a point where you're like, there's no hope anymore. This person is going to leave me. Everything I do, they just keep pulling away. Well, you're kind of anxiously like smothering them. It's going to happen. So then you're like, I don't like you. Get out of here. I can't handle this. And you push them away so that you have control. Nobody abandoned you. You have control over that statement, and you push them away. Avoidant attachment is this, and I am pulling this, this is like the basics. There's a lot of complicated things about it, but if you brass nuts and bolts, avoidant attachment is this fear of obligation. You don't want to be obligated to somebody else, and you don't want somebody else to be obligated to you. So your vulnerability meter is pretty, I guess high. I don't know if high or low. You don't have much. You don't have much capacity to be vulnerable. You don't want to give much into something because you really don't want a lot to be given into you. And so, I kind of see avoidant people, when you're on that avoidant attachment style, you're an island. Like, you're just kind of chilling on an island, and you may be able to see the mainland, and you may have a boat or two that comes out to the mainland. But for the most part, you're chilling on an island. You're not trying to have a bridge there. You really don't want a bridge there. There is a disorganized attachment style. I usually don't get into that. It's kind of this avoidant and fear happening all at the same time. And that happens typically like children who grow up with alcoholics, parents. It's like you never really know what you're going to get. And there's a lot of invalidating environment happening. And so it's really, really complex and really needs professional help because there's so many interwoven and interconnected traumas within that. So I really stick to these: you're secure, you're avoidant, you are insecure, because we can all relate to that space. And everybody has secure, insecure, and avoidant tendencies. It's just they're all different on when we do it, how often we do it, and what triggers us to get into that state. And there's a lot of science behind attachment. Attachment really comes from our limbic system. It's really that emotional part of our brain in the temporal lobe, especially where the amygdala is, and all the implicit memory. And remember that, or don't, There's no explicit memory before the age of 3. Our brain is not developed to have explicit memory. So that is 3 years of caregiver interaction where all you're doing is building implicit memory. So if anything comes up at that time, it's going to be there, and as soon as you get stressed, it's just another doorway in that amygdala. The prefrontal cortex, when you get into kind of the subcortical prefrontal cortex, you start seeing kind of this these interpersonal engagements. So you are able to be action oriented, you're making the critical decisions, you're having self-awareness, and then as you go into closer to that motor function, you're starting to have more interpersonal interactions. And that is going to help you to assess and respond to social cues. It allows you to have decision making on those social aspects. And that's where you're going to start getting some triggers too, of when you start to see patterns line up. That's how you're making decision, is this safe or not, and whether or not you want to go back to the amygdala for a reactionary approach. Dopamine is a big part of this as well, that VTA, or the nucleus accumbens, or ventral tegmental area, they are releasing dopamine and really kind of finding pleasure and bonding. And that's why, you know, The Bachelor is so effective and having people obsessed with them in a very short amount of times, because they're taking everything away from them and they're doing these high dopamine activities. So of course they're going to be like, this is the love of my life, even if it's not. Oxytocin is also our bonding hormone, so it's a really big part of how we connect with other. And the more positive interactions that we have with somebody, the more that oxytocin is going to come up. When it comes to early brain development and attachment, our caregiver influence is going to be a really big part of that. The responses that we get, or the consistency that we get, and the predictability we have with our caregiver is a big part of it. Consistency is key in parenting. It does matter what you do. I'm not saying it doesn't matter what you do, but for an anxious parent who thinks that, oh, I don't know, what if I do this, what if I do this, what if I do this? If you can stay consistent and be good enough, and there is literature and research around the good enough parent, you're going to see that if you stick to a good enough idea consistently, then you're going to find positive experiences in your parenting style and what you get from a child who has that kind of parenting in their life. When we talked about last week the intergenerational trauma, that HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and how it regulates stress, that also starts to come up when we look at grief. It allows you, secure attachments allow you to manage stress better, and insecure attachments, because you're not in a safe place, that methylation is going to happen with gene expression as your brain is developing and growing. As always, like, use it or lose it phenomenon. So there is neuroplasticity with attachment, that depending on your life changes and how you grow, your attachment style will change, as I've said. And that will change the way your mind reacts to how they engage with people. And there is adult attachment, and it can reflect early patterns from caregivers, but it also involves a lot of higher ordered processes as you engage with people, being able to really have that sense of trust in yourself. The trust feedback loop comes up a lot in attachment, which is why it comes up a lot in couples therapy. And then as we have high stressors, as we know, and that amygdala gets triggered and more implicit memory gets built as just natural process of life, we're going to see that our attachment will change. And a big part of what attachment is when it comes to relationship is the ability to have empathy, to have mirrored neurons happening, and to understand what other people's emotions are. It allows you to have conflict resolution. It allows you to have a supportive structure to be present for disagreements. And it allows you to build that trust feedback loop. That oxytocin and dopamine really play a large role in having trust for people and not letting doubt take over yourself, as well as taking over others. And so when we have any type of stress in our lives, as we said, some of these relationship patterns will come up, and that's just because it is a part of the amygdala. It is a part of our implicit memory and messaging that is happening that says something is different. The brain doesn't know good, bad, or indifferent. It just knows stress or not stress, and stress means death. It really is that basic. It is that basic. Stress means death. And so what we're doing is we're trying to change the brain so that it doesn't say stress means death, but that like stress is a part of life. Life is chaotic. Stress is a part of life, and what we're trying to do is ingratiate it, really look at it for what it is, and then make a decision on what we want to do with it. And some of the tools that we can use to develop secure traits are some of the things that I've talked about in the past videos. So go back to Bad Brain, go back to meditation and mindfulness. All of those tools are going to help you. And what you want to do is you want to work to stay in the here and now. You want your valid data points, and you want to be able to have positive affirmations that you trust yourself. And so whatever happens, you trust yourself to be present so that you can pull valid data points from the interaction and not get in a fear of abandonment or a fear of obligation. And if you fear abandonment or you fear obligation, then label it. I am having an insecure and avoidant attachment moment. I am not myself. I am going to invoice you. I'm going to say always and never all the time. I'm going to be really upset. I'm not going to clearly hear you. I'm going to hear what I want to hear. I'm going to pull you into a perceived reality. And so when you're doing that, then you know it's time to take a deep breath. You know it's time to find a connection back to your mind and body in here and now. And when it comes to healing attachment wounds, it's really important to find professional help. A therapist and coach can help you. And if you go to my video description, you can actually click and ask for a free 15-minute wellness evaluation. And what that will do is allow you to focus on whatever it is that you want to focus on. You share it with me, and I will give you clinical feedback. I will give you my clinical formulation in under 15 minutes. I really have a great understanding of what the brain is doing and an expertise in behavior that I can tell you exactly what's happening. You can tell me what your friend's doing, your boyfriend's doing. I can tell you exactly what's happening. So it's important to talk to somebody, a professional who understands and has a specialty in trauma and attachment, to be able to understand where your attachment is, where you are on the trust feedback loop, so that you can find grounding for yourself and specific support for yourself. I am Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions. Thank you so much.